there. Sorry, I was having trouble connecting.
That's okay. I know technology sometimes is just
Yes,
super
absolutely.
intense.
All
Well,
right, let me
thank you so much for doing this live with me. I've been wanting to chat with you so much because you are amazing and I love your
go.
content and I love what you stand for. I love what you talk about. And I'm such a gut nerd, so to speak. I really like to learn about it and I learn a lot from you too. So thank you
Oh,
for
I
joining.
love that. Thank you so much. No, I'm happy to be here. I've been following you as well. Somebody says no sound. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, can you hear? I can hear you just fine.
Yeah, I can hear
So
you fine as well. Just give us a thumbs up if you guys can hear us fine. Okay, so we'll just keep talking. No, I mean, I'm happy to be here. I mean, I think that there's so many, questions regarding gut health and so many misconceptions and confusion out there, and it's really sad because it ends up hurting a lot of people. And I'm happy to come on here and answer questions and just talk about you. I want to hear about your journey too, because I actually don't know anything about your health journey. But yeah, and I love all your content as well. All your food looks delicious, and your programs and your ebooks. I'm happy to share them to my audience as well.
awesome. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it seems like we've got audio. So if you don't have
Okay.
audio, maybe check your sound out because it might be on the viewer's end. But so far, we hear a lot of people can hear fine. Some can't. I'm not sure. Maybe hop out, hop back in if that's an issue. But yeah, so far we everyone can hear. But yeah, and I want to hear about your story too. Just really quick. We can
Yeah,
exchange
yeah,
some stories.
absolutely. So my story actually probably began when I was 16. I actually suffered with cystic acne, and a traditional, medical therapy of treating cystic acne is antibiotics. When creams don't work, I actually ended up getting put on Accutane, which is a very, potent derivative of vitamin A. And when you get put on that, you have to monitor your liver enzymes. It causes fatty liver, high cholesterol, these things. Actually, there's been several lawsuits associated with inflammatory bowel disease and Accutane. So I got put on that, and yeah, my acne would clear up, but I actually got put on Accutane like 2 to 3 times because it would come back. And at that time, this was in the late 90s, I guess. And I was in high school, and I just ended up Googling, not Googling, Google didn't exist, but like going on, I don't even, AOL was active back then. I ended up going on the internet and searching for an anti-inflammatory diet, and I came across Dr. Wheel's anti-inflammatory diet. And then I read a lot of regarding it, and I actually ended up going off all dairy, all red meat. I continued with like fish and chicken, but no processed foods, no dairy, no red meat. And my acne actually cleared up completely without medications. So that was my first taste of really like the power of nutrition on health. And I saw that there was a different avenue that we could go, a different path we could go on that could last. And my acne never came back after that, even though through college, you party, you eat all the junk, and it never came back. So I actually ended up curing myself with nutrition. Then fast forward, I did my medical training in different parts of the country, and then I was in and went back to my old ways, and I was finishing my training in gastroenterology in or midway through my training in Louisiana. And we know, Southern fare is just so fatty, so full of dairy and very meat heavy. And I was just feeling very bogged down. My husband as well. We were just feeling really, we felt like we were 80 years old. We couldn't function. Our sleep was being affected. And for a couple years, I had been, you know, talking to him and telling him, look, I wish I could, you know, go plant-based, go to a vegan diet, and but I don't think I can do that. So, you know, fast forward to then, I'm midway through my gastroenterology fellowship. I'm feeling ill. I'm giving recommendations to my patients, and I'm myself not walking the walk. I said, okay, we gotta get rid of everything in the house that is, you know, animal based. We binge watched all the documentaries that we've all seen, basically we started making those changes. And at least at home, we threw out everything, we donated, and we made that big change. And it was difficult because, again, Louisiana fare is so rich in animal products. So then we did that, and a year later, you know, so we saw the effects right away in our energy levels, in our sleep. We started dropping the weight, and my husband, who a lot of, you know, the people that follow me know, that he has suffered with Crohn's disease since he was, you know, 16 years old, and severe disease, despite being on biologic, like chemotherapy style drugs. He had never been in remission, and fast forward a year later, he was confirmed to be in remission. He maintained his medication regimen, but despite being on medication for 10 years, he had never achieved remission. And with that plant-based diet, he achieved remission. And we see that, actually, we see that in studies from Japan and Israel, that when you couple a plant-based diet with traditional therapies, in Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, people achieve remission at much higher rates, and they maintain the remission, and they may even be able to come off the medications. And he was able to come off one of those immunosuppressive medications, and that is a huge deal. So yeah, very exciting stuff. And then, you know, I was able to start actually feeling confident in talking to my patients about the power of nutrition and lifestyle in treatment of GI disorders. And I started implementing that as first-line therapy. And basically, you know, I would get my patients off of medications, and then all their other health parameters would actually improve as a side effect of you know, being on nutrition therapy for their GI disorders. They would be like, doc, oh my God, look at my cholesterol levels, look at my hemoglobin A1C, which is a measure of your sugar levels in the last 3 months. And they would previously be pre-diabetic or diabetic, and their A1C would just drop significantly, to the point that actually some patients who were on very high dose insulin, we would have to be monitoring them every single day and dropping their insulin levels, just because their sugars were so low. You know, they're normal for us, but with the insulin so low, so we just have to drop their insulin levels from one day to the next, and patients halved it or came off medications completely. So it's just as a side effect of using nutrition therapy for their GI disorders. So all very exciting stuff, you know. So I've seen it not only in myself, but in my husband's health. We raised, I just recently had my second child.
Congratulations!
So,
I know,
thank you.
So precious.
Thank you. So our 3.5-year-old, you know, he's completely plant-based, has been plant-based from birth, and he is, you know, knock on wood, that child has never had to have antibiotics, thankfully. He's never been hospitalized in his life for any, you know, diseases or anything like that. We're just very blessed. And obviously, you know, my passion is gut microbiome optimization from birth. And we know that 70% of our immune system is in our gut. So the gut health and everything that we optimize for gut health has these side effects that manifest throughout the body, and more important than ever, you know, in our immunity.
Yeah. Oh, I love your story. Thank you for sharing all this wonderful. Yeah. And with me, I discovered I never really tried like a traditional plant-based kind of diet, because I was always really drawn to the raw version of it. For some reason, it just was like really attractive, and I never really stuck with it from 2004 till about 2014. And I would try all kinds of diets. I worked in natural health. I was a shipping receiving coordinator for a health food store, like multiple chains of health foods. So like I was taught all kinds of like different ideas and theories. So, and that's something I really want to talk to you about, is the different kinds of things that people do that can damage their gut while they're trying to do something good for themselves. Right. They don't realize that it's actually damaging. So it was like 10 years that I would like off and on try different diets, blah, blah, blah. And in 2014, I was in a similar position. I was feeling like I was 80. I had cystic acne as well. I was 34 at the time. And I was like, that's it. I'm going to go raw again or whatever. But this time I watched the documentaries, and that was what clicked finally. And I'm like, okay, I'm vegan. And I assumed that most vegans ate raw food anyway. So I was just like, I'm just going to eat raw food. And I started eating a lot of raw food. And at the time, right now we live in Vegas, but at the time I was living in Canada. I grew up, I was born and raised in Edmonton, Alberta, and it's cold there and food is expensive. And you can get really good fruit, but if you want to get like the tropical fruit or some more like stranger varieties of food, it's pretty difficult in certain areas. So I ate a lot more greens and a lot more vegetables and a lot more things than some of the people in the raw community were doing. And I found it really easy to eat an abundance of raw food because it was just, I was eating so much variety. My gut issues went away, my cystic acne went away, my hormones balanced, I lost 70 pounds. It was just like my entire life, literally my entire life changed because like I ended up moving here to the US to marry my love, who's also raw vegan. And yeah, it's just like my whole life changed just from making those positive changes. But I'm grateful that I didn't follow some of these extreme diet things that a lot of people fall into, because my gut, I feel, I want to ask you really bad, like, how does somebody know when their gut is like strong? Like, what would be some signs? But we can talk about that later. But like, I feel personally like my gut is super strong. I'll eat like 25 different things in a salad. And I'm just like we know Dr. Will, I've got the book, right? Dr. Will and his plant points and everything. I'm like, I just see how many we can get. And Nate and I will eat like on average 80 different types of plant foods in a week. Like we
I love it.
Seek it out. We look for it. We specifically go to different stores to get things that we can't get at our regular supermarket. And I feel like a lot of people don't do that. They go to their one store, they get the same things over and over again, and they don't expand and they don't explore. But also, especially in the raw vegan community, it's all about simplicity and limiting and restricting and low fiber, not eating enough. And these cause digestive issues because they're just not fueling themselves properly and they're not getting enough variety. Because my top two things, as you've noticed, is like eat enough and get variety. It's like you don't have to be raw vegan to do that. Like you just get more plants in. So that's a little bit about my story.
I love that. It's parallel to ours. So I love that. You know, you bring up a really good point. And so I live in Miami now, and we have a lot of raw vegans here. And they fall for those common mistakes, you know, and I love that that's your philosophy, you know, eating enough and getting enough variety, because I honestly believe that when you're doing when you're doing any change in your lifestyle, it's really important to get the proper education on how to do it properly, because otherwise, you know, you're just shortchanging yourself. You're not going to be doing it correctly. At first you may feel great, but then if you're not getting enough variety, if you're not getting enough calories, not only the gut health will be affected, but actually everything else, you know. These people start to feel low energy eventually. They start to feel like they have even brain fog because they're not eating enough, right? And they're not actually feeding their gut microbiome to the fullest extent. And then that results in brain fog. It results in losing your hair, you know, muscle wasting, all these different side effects from not doing it correctly. So I think you should definitely be heading the raw vegan movement because, you know, my experience, and you're definitely changing my perspective on it. And I think that's really important, actually. because my perspective has been limited to people who are not doing it correctly. But I think that in getting that amount of variety, you're actually, you know, hitting all those target points that we, checking all those boxes that we need to feed the gut microbiome correctly. And yes, you know, restriction is definitely where we're seeing all these dietary trends, fad diets heading in that direction. And they have been, right, for a long time. But now I think we have a lot more of them. And because of social media, they disseminate a lot quicker. So we just have a lot of people who are falling for them because they want to improve their health and they haven't gotten the care that they need from traditional medical, you know, the traditional medicine system. They haven't gotten the time being listened to and really gotten that care that they need. So they're seeking out answers for themselves, and this is what's available out there on social media. And so they're falling for them. And again, at first they may feel great, but eventually it'll catch up with them.
Yeah, and something that I've noticed a lot is the trend for juice fasting and water fasting. And obviously there's soluble fiber in a juice. We can't deny that because it's part of it. But the low amount of fiber in a juice is not enough. Like Nate and I, when we've done our chronometer, and we're up with like upwards of like 100, sometimes like 110 grams of fiber a day. And that's a lot, right? But for the vast majority of people who are having issues, if they're already eating like 5 to 15 grams of fiber a day and they go on a juice fast that's maybe 20 grams of fiber, yeah, they're getting a little more, but they're still falling short and they're still experiencing issues because you're not feeding the full range of the microbes that you could. And I know we had a conversation and you're like, we have to talk about this. So I really want to ask you about some of the issues that you find from people following these style of, you know, fad. I want to call them fads, but because there's people who like they put them on a pedestal, like it is the most amazing thing on the face of the planet and you have to do it in order to be healthy. What is your take on it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny that you asked that. Well, it's not funny, we were meant to talk about this, but it's funny that I actually saw my most extreme patient who had done, I just saw him today a couple hours ago. So he's my most extreme juice cleansing patient because he did it for years. So he did 2 out of 3 meals a day were juices for more than a decade, actually. So that's been my most extreme case. So I started working with him, I believe it was late last year, and he came to me very desperate because he was physically previously very active, and now was basically what we call cachectic. He was completely malnourished, complete muscle wasting. He couldn't even walk a mile. That was how malnourished he was. And then he was retaining a lot of liquid in his legs because he was basically lacking in protein in his diet. And he had done this juice cleansing for more than a decade. And when he tried to reincorporate foods, because he felt like he was not doing well, so he tried to reincorporate foods, he basically could not tolerate any foods. So he was completely plant-based for a long time, for more than a decade, but in doing this extreme juice cleansing, had deprived his body and his gut microbiome of all the nutrients needed to basically make it thrive. So he shows up, no energy, complete muscle wasting, and not able to eat even tofu, like even tofu, which is like, processed, not highly processed, but processed. So, and well tolerated by most people. So, we started working together. Now he gets, more than 30 plants per week, which is a complete, opposite of where he was, not even being able to tolerate tofu. He has put on weight. He has muscle. So he's cut, or his arms are cut, with muscle. He is sleeping through the night. He had years of insomnia, and only able to sleep like 2 hours at a time. And now he's sleeping through the night and he feels better than he's ever felt before. So, that was my most extreme case. But, you know, even in the less extreme ones, people that follow a juice cleansing for a couple months, you're really depriving the microbiome of their nutrient source. So then they're gonna decrease in numbers. So people ask me, do they die out completely? Well, it depends on how long you do it for. If you do it for a very long time, there are chances that some of them will die out completely. But if you do it shorter term, you know, we can bring them back, and we don't have to do that with supplements. We just refeed them, you know. And the microbiome is very resilient. So just like they resist antibiotics, right? Like antibiotic resistant bugs, right? We actually know that they resist being, even the good ones resist being wiped out. So that's really good. That's really good news. That means that there's a lot that we can do from a nutrition and lifestyle standpoint and integrative practices to bring it back in a very natural way, you know, using what your body, what you already have in your body, So, but definitely, I think people do a lot of damage by doing these restrictive diets. And so juice cleansing may seem like an extreme for some people, but if you think about it, keto diet is an extreme too, right? You're avoiding a lot of high fiber foods, and it's the same idea. So a lot of these different diets that rely on restriction of plant-based foods are going to have similar effects. And again, not only gut health effects, but we know that microbiome effects manifest all over your body from head to toe, and your immune system as well. So
yeah. What other kind of extreme things have you seen in your practice that people typically do? Because I find like people, when they want to do like a juice fast or a water fast or a cleanse or something like that, they already have an issue, or they're trying to reach this level of purity or perfection or a perfectly cleansed gut. I would really love to hear what you think about mucoid plaque. Yeah.
I have no idea what that even is. Like,
Yeah, so there's this idea in the raw community and the detox community. I want to say the detox community because I don't like to put myself in with that group, but they believe that if you cleanse and cleanse and cleanse enough, you'll extract this old dead fecal matter from 25 years ago or whatever. And they have lots of pictures to show, right? They'll take pictures of these long things.
Okay, so now I completely get it. So actually I have a lot to say about that, because
yes, please.
that's actually those long mucus plaques, or those long strings of mucus that you shed, that is actually the same thing that is shed in patients with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, which is a very diseased gut. So that mucus, you know, and all my integrative GI colleagues talk about that. That mucus is supposed to stay there. It's supposed to stay bound to the colon wall because it's highly protective. So, you know, when we talk about our colon wall, we have stool that, you know, travels along it. We have the microbiome, both adherence, so bound to the colon wall, but also on the surface of the colon wall. So stool, microbiome, and then we have mucus. And that mucus is such an important protective layer of our colon wall, because when you actually slough it off, it comes out in your stool, like in patients with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. That means that that colon wall is completely exposed. Like if you had plaster or whatever the bones of the house were, that's completely exposed. And that there's no separation there. Those are your epithelial cells, the single layer of cells separating the outside world from the inside world. On the other side of that, inside the body, is the immune system. So that 70% of the immune system just waiting to react, right? So if you slough off that mucus layer, which is what these, these people are doing, those cells, that single layer of cells is exposed. And what happens? They start to separate. That comes the idea of leaky gut or increased intestinal permeability. And then you've sloughed off one of the major protective layers. And then all the outside world is going to go inside. The immune system is going to come and attack, and it's going to over attack because there's no protection, there's no boundaries, there's no barrier. So it's going to attack everything, and that will manifest a full inflammatory response in the whole body. It's like if you have a burn victim, their skin has been completely sloughed off. They're very subject to infection, right? Because they've lost their protective layer, which is the skin is one of the major protective layers, but the lining of the colon wall, that mucus layer, is a huge protective layer from the outside world. So these people are actually doing themselves so much harm. I've never even heard of this, but it is what we see in patients with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. And they take pictures, and we tell them, we need to heal your gut, right? So these people are thinking that they're doing themselves something useful, something beneficial, and they're actually mimicking something as bad as Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. So this is really, really dangerous territory.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because this is, like I said, it's a big part of the raw community, and I try to speak out about it, and I get a lot of resistance because it's so valued in the purity world, where it's like, you have to get this stuff out, otherwise you can never heal, where it's the opposite, where we need to just heal.
We want it inside. We want it
Yeah.
inside. We want to keep it inside. In fact, studies show that the thinner your mucus layer is, the more prone to microbiome imbalances, leaky gut, intestinal permeability is. And actually, so in the studies that us, plant-based gastroenterologists use to promote plant-based eating for gut health, and in major conferences, our major GI conferences, these are the same visuals that are used. The thicker that mucus layer bound to your colon wall, the healthier your gut health, the healthier your immunity is. So imagine somebody who's actually shedding that mucus layer, they have no mucus layer left and they're completely exposed. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is everything against the gut health scientific community. This is everything like that should not be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they believe that it's this toxic matter that has to be expelled, whereas it's like, no, we need to feed our gut microbiome, and we need to grow that, and we need to stop restricting our variety. And again, in the raw world, it's really about simplicity and limiting the amount of foods that people are eating. Like, I know some people, they'll go on something called a mono meal island, where they just eat watermelon for like 30 days, or they'll do banana island, where they just eat bananas for 30 days, or grapes for 30 days or something, just one food source. And what kind of symptoms does a person have when they come like from that state where they're trying to get better? Like, they already have issues, so they do this cleanse and they feel good during it because they've limited, like all of the processed foods and the animal products. So they feel good because of that. But then when they try to refeed, they end up having to go back on the cleanse or back on the thing. So how does someone come out of that vicious circle of
so when they start to refeed the gut with more variety, at first they're just completely intolerant to it. So they're going to get a lot of bloating, probably a lot of diarrhea too. So bloating and diarrhea are the main ones. And then they're going to feel fatigued because, when you have diarrhea, everything is coming out of you. You're actually not retaining anything. So the way to do that is to do it very mindfully. we start with a food diary. It's really important that, and it's all trial and error because everybody's microbiome is so different and everybody's health journey has been so different that we don't have validated tests to be able to tell you what you're deficient in. And actually, there are tests out there, many tests being sold all over the internet. And that was another, I was going to bring that up, that's actually one of the leading causes to food restrictions. Using those microbiome tests and then thinking that you're intolerant to all these foods when just by talking to somebody like me or one of my GI dietitians, we could have told you that without spending $500 on a test or on supplements to be able to heal that. So, so basically we do it very mindfully with a food diary and trial and error. So we start with low dose, low amounts of these foods that we want to reincorporate. And we start with foods that are less likely to cause you a lot of bloating. So a lot of the low FODMAP foods. We do, depending on whether you're raw, vegan, or do cooked foods, we do prefer to do some more cooked foods. But again, we start with trial and error. So if you were only on a watermelon diet for 30 days, then we would start with something similar, like something along the melon group. So we'll do cantaloupe, we'll do other melons, and then we'll branch out to, leafy greens, something that we know is more likely to be tolerated well. And then we start to branch off so we start with very low dose, maybe sometimes even like a quarter of a teaspoon to give the microbiome a taste, a flavor, and kind of wake them up, right? And then the next day, if you tolerated it well, we'll do a full teaspoon and then we'll go from there. But it has to be very slow and mindful process. And it's a personalized process, So me and my dietitians will give a food list of the ones that we want to start off with that are less likely to cause bloating, and then we'll expand from there, but it has to be a very personalized approach because everybody's microbiome is different, everybody's health journey and their food restrictions has been different. So it's very dependent on them. But it's a very active process. And after a couple weeks, we actually, again, this patient had done a juice cleanse for 10 years, So we're able to see huge changes in even just 4 to 6 weeks. And then at the 3-month mark, they're feeling back to health, a lot of energy, gaining weight when they were previously completely malnourished. Their skin looks great. Their bowel movements are now, solid and soft, how we want them to be, not diarrhea, not constipation. But we have to do it very slowly. And, it's so, when you say that it has to be a personalized approach, this is how you want to do it. You want to do it with somebody who's very knowledgeable about gut health, who can think outside the box, who's going to work with you and your history and your current issues, and who's going to listen to you. But there's no quick fix to heal your gut, and there's no one size fits all. There's no way that I can say, hey, avoid all, like lectins, all beans, and then you're gonna heal your gut, so things like that, which we see a lot of in the fad diets, that is just not gonna work for everybody.
Yeah, I've noticed some people will say, like, who are in the extreme version of raw, they'll look over my salad and be like, broccoli isn't human food, or beans aren't human food because we can't digest them. And I'm like, well, maybe you can't digest them because you've limited them so much over your life that your gut microbiome is altered to not be able to digest those foods. And you just have to go slow.
Absolutely. So, people who, again, fall prey for these trends and these restrictive diets are because they themselves usually have noticed an intolerance to them. But the goal is not to further restrict them, right? The goal is to heal your gut so you can actually tolerate them better.
Yeah. And one of the things that people typically are looking for when they go raw is this whole idea that zero gas equals perfect digestion. So I wanted to ask you, what is kind of like the normal amount of gas for somebody to have? Because it's part of digestion, it's part of the
Yeah.
bacteria digesting. But people seem to feel like if they have a little bit of gas or even excessive amounts of gas, which obviously is an indication of an issue.
Yeah.
But what is normal for gas?
Yeah, so one, gas and a little bit of bloating, that's all the microbiome working for you. Like they're actually doing, they're there, they're present, and that's a great sign because they're actually digesting, breaking down, fermenting, and doing all the amazing different jobs that they do in our body. Every year I give a talk on this, and the list of functions for the microbiome grows and grows, you know. So that's them working for you. So we all pass gas, and we don't even know most of the gas that we're passing, right? Most of the gas that we pass is actually not, like, we don't perceive it, and where our body is naturally expelling gas multiple times per day. Most of it is odorless, and that's why we don't even perceive it, or it's not like a big enough uh, amount that we are perceiving that pressure in our rectum, for example. So we pass gas all day long. We don't perceive it. We pass it in our sleep. We only perceive it when we feel that pressure in our rectum and we have to let the gas go, or, you know, obviously if we burp, and or if it has an odor, but only a small percentage of it has an odor. So this is a natural process, and this is all good. This is just means that it's like if you saw a factory and you saw the fumes, those toxic fumes coming out. Yeah, they're coming out. The factory workers are working. They're doing their job, you know. So I don't know if that's the best analogy, but
It's a good analogy, yeah.
it is our microbiome working for us. So it is a good sign. The problem happens when your gas becomes when it causes you distress, either because you experience significant bloating. So I like to quantify things. So in a scale from 1 to 10, I always ask patients, how much is your bloating? And if it's, 4 or below, that's great. That's perfect. Now, when we start getting into that, say, constant 6 to 10 range, then that's an issue. But if sometimes you go out to eat, or you eat something you haven't eaten in a long time and you experience a 6 or a 7, that's just one time. That's not the pattern that you're seeing. So there's no issue there. But those people that experience consistent bloating of 6 and above, that's where we see that, they're having issues, they're struggling, and we have to find out why. There are many reasons why we could be having a lot of bloating. We could be having a food intolerance, we could be having constipation, and we may not even know it's constipation. Somebody who has struggled with constipation their entire life, they believe that that's normal. That's not normal. So constipation could be a cause of bloating, food intolerance, enzyme deficiencies such as pancreatic issues. When we have pancreatic insufficiency, which we test for all the time in our GI practice, this is normal stuff that a gastroenterologist tests for you. So enzyme deficiencies could be the cause. There could be many different causes. It could be your diet, just your diet. If you have a diet high in processed foods, or like, for example, dairy, 70% of Americans are lactose intolerant. So that's going to cause a lot of, you don't have the enzyme to be able to digest the dairy. So, and again, we know dairy to be inflammatory. So, why even consume it? So things like that. There could be many different causes, and it's about getting to that root cause for you. There's no, single answer for all of you out there. There's no general answer for all of you. There's a personalized answer for each of you. And sometimes it could be a combination of different factors. So getting to that root cause is really important to see why you're suffering with so much gas and bloating.
Yeah, and that it's such an interesting topic because so many people are trying to get to this level of perfection with their digestion, not realizing that what they're doing is causing more issues when they go back to eating the whole food and that kind of thing. What would be your take on food combining? Because that's another thing in the raw community where people are they're separating a bunch of different foods and they're in a way I feel sometimes like 98% of people who have eating disorders have gut issues, and it's so linked with our mental health, and our gut and brain are linked. And this, like, the idea of like limiting and separating our foods and doing all that kind of stuff can be in a way detrimental. But I wanted to get your take on it because so many people do limit things, and they eat things separate from other things because it causes gas and bloating. So they're like, well, you have to eat this alone or this with this, and you can't combine these. And it gets confusing for people. And then they fall into that mental gymnastics of trying to separate everything and control their diet.
Yeah. So I actually have a post, a fun post on this subject, which could probably be completely misinterpreted by somebody who is doing, food restriction. And so there are foods that enhance each other, like avocados and tomatoes. That's why it's throughout many cultures, they're used together. However, when it comes to the microbiome, there is there's no truth to food combining, because so there are no trials saying that we should combine different foods or avoid combining different foods because they're detrimental to gut health, etc. So our microbiome is so incredibly complex and beyond our comprehension. And even in the Microbiome World Congress that happens every year, which just happened a couple months ago, that I attend, there is we haven't cracked the code to the microbiome, and we're nowhere near cracking that code. The goal right now of these scientists, that these are the scientists that present at these conferences, the ones that are really doing the very heavy duty work of trying to crack this code. They say that we have to focus on the function of the microbiome. So we're so beyond comprehension of how the microbiome works, but what we know is that when we are restricting these different foods or avoiding different plant-based foods, we're actually, again, not feeding the huge variety of microbes that we have in our gut. So again, we're doing them a disservice. So it's a pattern of restrictive eating that is part of this talk that we see with all these fad diets, trends, etc. So there's no veracity to say that you should avoid combining different things. Even when we say, phytates, for example, in leafy greens, they prevent the absorption of certain things. Well, you're not always going to eat the same food in the same ways, So it's that pattern of behavior throughout the week, of nutrition behavior throughout the week, that really determines your overall health. And we do run into trouble, like you mentioned, when we are routine, the same foods every day, and restrictive eating, etc. So if you are working, none of us are perfect. If you are working, listening to this talk and starting to work on including more variety of plant-based foods in your diet, you're going to be getting all the microbiome needs that your body needs to function and be able to do all of its functions. So it's that pattern of behavior throughout the week. And it's like you said, eating disorders is a very common issue in the gut health community, both ways, because digestive issues lead to people not wanting to feel ill, so they naturally will avoid foods that make them feel ill. But then that causes an eating disorder. It causes a lot of stress, anxiety regarding eating and meal times, and it causes an eating disorder. But also an eating disorder can cause digestive issues because you are restricting your nutrition. So it's a vicious cycle, and that is something that a lot of a lot of people in the health space don't have in the front of their mind. And even when I write my posts, I have to think about this and be mindful about it. But definitely most doctors, most wellness experts, most health gurus don't have this in the front of their mind. If they did, then they would be a lot more mindful in the way that they discussed eating and nutrition in general.
I'm so glad that you said that, because I see it as well from my perspective, where it's very restrictive. And in a way, you sometimes, if you're looking in from the outside, where you have digestive issues and you're trying to find a solution, and you come into, say, the raw community or detox community, and you try these things and they don't work because now you can't digest all kinds of things, I feel like a lot of people get gaslit, and they're told that they didn't do it long enough. They have to try harder. They need to limit this and limit that. And then it just kind of creates this snowball effect. And I get a lot of these messages, and that's why I talk about it. It's a hard topic to talk about because these people want to be pure and perfect. They want to reach this level of, the perfect diet and the perfect digestion and live forever and all this kind of stuff. Whereas they don't realize that they're pulling these souls in who aren't, they're just going to fall into this cycle. And I hear the stories, and it's really heartbreaking. So I'm glad that you said that. I'm glad that it's part of the practice, and I love in Dr. Will's book, he talks about that. If people have issues with restrictive diets, to go talk to a therapist, because a lot of times they're linked. They're so linked. And you don't have to be diagnosed with an eating disorder, but a lot of people have disordered eating patterns that can lead to
Absolutely.
eating disorder from digestive issues.
Absolutely. So one of the most common statements that I get from patients that I've seen is exactly what you just said. Oh, I tried this diet and that diet, but I don't think I did it correctly because or I don't think I did it long enough because at first I felt well and then I didn't. So there's a lot of blame and shame and guilt in having followed these restrictive diets. And again, all of this is contributing to mental health disorders that are furthering their gut health issues because of the gut-brain connection, right? We know that stress and anxiety, and especially food anxiety, contributes. That is all information that the brain is feeding to the gut, and the gut is really responding in a way that's not optimal for gut health. And again, microbial health and all the different functions that the microbiome does for us. So it really is a vicious circle. It worsens everything about their gut health. It worsens their restrictive eating. They feel out of control, so they further restrict the eating. It's absolutely an eating disorder, and I see it all the time. And I spend my hour-long initial visit debunking all the different lies that they have been told and that they internalize. They truly, truly believe it. And then that is just the beginning of the process, because if they're able to believe me, right? So they've believed all these people, so they're like, why should I believe you? If nobody has been able to help me, then I tell them, give me a couple weeks. Let's start incorporating these foods little by little, and let's see how you're feeling. And then once they give it a shot, they really see how variety and diversity is really what's going to get them to healing. And then they feel so good and so proud of themselves and confident when they're able to tolerate foods that they haven't been able to tolerate in decades, So it really is a beautiful thing to see once you've gotten somebody out of a restrictive eating pattern and they're enjoying life, because you see them come back to life. They're able to participate in family meals. They're able to participate in their ethnic meals, you know. So many ethnic foods have been demonized by all these trends, and these people, they just, you know, they're not able to participate in social gatherings. What how much more damage can you do to somebody's health, to somebody's mental and physical health, than not being able to eat with their family or with their friends, or eat their ethnic foods that they grew up eating, you know?
Yeah, that is so sad. It really is sad because, like you said, it's the circle. So they're having the issues and then they restrict and then it gets worse. And so, how does somebody know when they have reached that, like, healthy gut?
Yeah.
What would you say? Someone's like, you got a strong gut, you're good to go.
So that's a great question. So basically, you know, I take inventory of what they're struggling with at the beginning of our visits, and they're often struggling with the same issues or similar pattern of issues. So I go head to toe. So usually is, you know, brain fog, lack of concentration, lack of energy, trouble with sleeping. So that's the initial intake, and then we go down, and it's bloating and diarrhea or constipation, skin issues, all these things. And then when we start working together, the first thing that usually happens is that they have increased energy, you know, because that's a surge of more food reaching your microbiome, and then the microbes are reacting right away. And then little by little, you see the bloating improving, and then the skin issues, etc. So, you know, the signs of a good, healthy gut is that you feel healthy, that you feel energized, that you're sleeping well, that, you know, for women, it's different because we have our menstrual cycles and our hormones are shifting throughout the month. But in general, you shouldn't have, you know, if you have your period, you shouldn't have debilitating pain that you need to take medication for all the time, or, you know, most days of your period. They start to feel energized, and their bloating and constipation or diarrhea improves over the months, completely resolved, actually, without the need for medication. That's our goal, right? Without needing medications or even supplements for constipation, for example, or diarrhea. That's our goal, to be able to treat that with nutrition. So, so basically, an immediate improvement within a couple days or a week of energy levels, sleep, and then the gut health issues, and then skin issues, and other things that they didn't even think were related will start to improve as well.
Right. I know. I love that part. It's like once you start eating the proper foods and you feed your gut microbiome, they do so much for us. They do so much. And like you said, we have no even idea the full extent of what they do for us. And it's so important to add the more variety. What would you say are some of the top foods? I know people are always like, well, what's better than that? I like to say it's not about certain foods, it's about the variety, like get it all in. But there's some, like I personally have been loving adding sunchokes and fennel seeds to my salads. Those have been really awesome on my digestion to add
Yes.
those.
So some of the top foods for gut health specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you know, I think that ginger and turmeric have been extensively studied. So turmeric has been actually studied in trials, and it decreases inflammation. It's been studied in rheumatoid arthritis. It's been studied in inflammatory bowel disease. So turmeric is a really potent anti-inflammatory. Again, has been part of ethnic foods for millennia, and it's just so gut healthy. So we love turmeric. We love using it fresh in our foods or in powder form, and we actually use it in supplement form. You know, it's very concentrated concentrated turmeric amount for our patients with ulcerative colitis. So ginger is just incredibly gut healthy. We love adding it to foods. In fresh form is how we use it. In my practice, peppermint leaves, tea, peppermint oil. We actually use peppermint oil from a capsule because it's very concentrated, better than way higher content than the peppermint oil droplets for the essential oils. So peppermint is a really powerful relaxant of digestive of your muscles, and actually helps with bloating significantly. So it's one of the supplements that we use. Again, it's just peppermint capsule or peppermint tea or chewing peppermint leaves that we use for bloating and abdominal discomfort. So those are my top three, and like, I guess they're herbs, but roots and herbs. But those are, fennel is great. There's other ones that we use in tea form because of the concentration that are great. And I have a post on all the different teas that are helpful for digestive issues. But yes, herbs and spices are amazing. They actually help us absorb nutrients better and digest them better. So herbs and spice, cumin, somebody asked cumin. Yes, there are so many ethnic herbs and spices that we should continue to use in our and bring back, right? We've lost a lot of these cultural foods in being part of a more modernized or westernized society, and we need to go back to them. So a lot of these spices and herbs were used in our cultural foods for a reason, because they help us digest it better. So those would be my top three that peppermint, turmeric, and ginger.
Nice. I love it. I love it. Yeah, we have our fresh turmeric waiting to go in our dressings all the time. How about garlic? Garlic is one of those things that, again, in the raw community, people are like, it's not good for you. It's antibiotics, so it kills all your bacteria. Like, there's a lot of fear going on. So what about garlic? Because I eat garlic. I eat so much garlic.
So garlic is, again, it's used throughout the world in different cultures. Most cultures actually use garlic because of its prebiotic benefits. So it's a prebiotic, it feeds our gut microbiome. So some people definitely it's not a low FODMAP food. It is high FODMAP, which means that if you have irritable bowel or you have issues with bloating, it may cause issues. But again, the solution is not to avoid it. Long term, the solution is to fix your gut and then reincorporate it. So if you do have issues with garlic, I would recommend trying different forms of garlic, right? Powder form, cooked versus raw, dose dependent. Like we talked about, a lot of things are dose dependent. So if you can include them in smaller doses, you're refeeding the gut microbiome, and eventually you'll be able to tolerate higher doses. That is really the idea behind a lot of the things that we do in our practice to be able to bring back tolerance to different foods. Just minimize the amount and then work your way up to tolerating a normal amount of it. Obviously, if it gives you crazy symptoms, we're not going to do that. We're not going to even include a small amount, but we use different parts of the garlic to be able to feed the microbiome, or we use similar foods to refeed the microbiome and then reintroduce the garlic.
I love that idea of, it's not about elimination, it's about lowering the amount and then slowly building up from there, and taking time and being patient with yourself is so key. I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about them not being able to tolerate certain foods. And so we were talking about broccoli, for example, because that's a big one. Broccoli is a hard one for a lot of people to digest. Because they don't eat it very often. And then when they do, they're eating like 3 cups, and then it causes gas and bloating. And I was saying, it's kind of like going to the gym. if you go to the gym and you lift weights, and if you start off with like 50-pound weights and you're not used to that, you're going to be sore the next day, right? But we all know that when you go to the gym and you put your muscles under tension, you're going to feel slightly sore the next day, but that's a sign that your muscles are growing. So I'm like, start small, start with one little floret if you need to, start with half a floret if you need to, and then work up. It's like starting at the gym with 5-pound weights, right? Because we don't say, oh, I went to the gym and the next day I was sore, so I'm never going to go to the gym again.
Right, absolutely. It's like training for a marathon. Sorry, I was moving. My phone
That's
is
okay.
about to die, so I asked my husband to bring me a charger. So if it dies, I'm sorry. I'll come back
It's
on.
okay.
Hopefully, it doesn't die before he comes with a charger. So it's like training for a marathon. You know, you have your microbiome army who's really working to help you digest all these different foods. And if you haven't fed them, if you haven't trained them for a long time, then they are going to be weak. They're not going to be able to do that function. But if you take it slowly, patiently, and mindfully, then they'll be able to come back. But again, if you've been restricting these foods for years, you have to be even more patient, right? Because it might take an even longer time, months as opposed to weeks, to be able to get it back. And again, you know, we all want a quick fix, and we know where quick fixes can get us, you know, with all these diet trends and crazes. So there's no quick fix and there's no generalized approach. It really has to be personalized to you and your health journey and your current symptoms and what your goals are for your health, because each of us has completely different health goals, you know, so it's about working towards those. And that's why it's so important to see somebody who has you know, that integrative but still evidence-based approach to be able to work with you, and who really is truly an expert in their field. There are so many people that, you know, don't have the background to be able to help and could cause more damage, you know?
Yeah, and we see that a lot in social media. People come on, they do a diet for maybe a couple months, and then it's the be-all end-all of everything. Or on the flip side, we see a lot of people do these restrictive things over and over and over again, and then after a certain amount of time, it's like their body just can't handle it anymore, and they go back to eating animal products because there's zero fiber.
I see them all the time. I see this all the time. I see this all the time from people doing it willingly, because they can't tolerate fiber, right? They've done restriction for so long or so many times that they've really done a lot of damage to their microbiome, so the microbiome can digest the fiber. But also I see it in the health space, a lot of these health experts promoting animal products, actually. And I think that's really dangerous territory, because again, yes, you might feel good eating it, but you're not solving the underlying issue, which is you're not solving the intolerance to begin with. You're not getting to the root cause of your illness at all.
Yeah, so then they start, they promote a lot of fear around eating plants, because they're like, no, like this is not human food, you can't eat this, and like you said, like the lectins and the phytates and everything. And if you're eating a wide variety of foods, it's like a small amount of many things. And I did a reel that was really good, that was one of my favorite reels that I did, is that we don't eat large amounts of a few things, we eat small amounts of many things. So it's like we try to get as much in, because that gets us the calories that we need, but it also gets us the variety. So we don't have to have like 2 cups of broccoli. We can have a cup, and we can have some radicchio and endive and fennel and romaine and iceberg and, you know, like mixed greens and corn and tomatoes and avocado. We can put it all in our salad if we want. And the more variety that we have, the stronger our guts become. And then we don't have to worry about being intolerant to these foods, because we just have smaller amounts, but large amounts of calories to be able to sustain us. And it's sad when people feel they have to restrict things fully when they just need to eat smaller amounts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we have so many different studies showing the benefits of, plant forward, plant-based diets. But even now, more pertinent than ever, we actually have studies in this pandemic showing how plant-based diet is protective against severe COVID. Why? Because it's working to feed your microbiome, where your immune system, 70% is right next to your microbiome. They're constantly interacting. It's not a foolproof method but the study was in healthcare workers, and it showed that those who followed a plant-based diet were protected from severe COVID. So that is testament to the power of nutrition in immunity and in health overall. So what more evidence do these people need to follow a more plant-based diet?
Yeah.
Clearly, there's no study showing that a carnivore diet or keto diet is protective. In fact, we know that it's not. It increases your inflammatory response in the body. And when we have an increased inflammatory response in the body, then the body's immune system is not able to fight off infection,
Yeah, totally. And then they get scared of things like nightshades. That was another thing I wanted to ask. Like, what do you think about the nightshade thing? Because as a recipe creator, I get a lot of people ask me, can you make this without nightshades? I need a nightshade free, and I need this free, and I need that free. And I'm like, but I'm a variety person. Like, you're not gonna get like.
So again, with the nightshades, the phytates, the lectins, it's all part of the same thing. These are trends to sell you a book, sell you supplements, sell you into a lifestyle, because those people cannot tolerate the fiber, and they are trying to promote this idea to the world. But again, it's in trying to get you to be more restrictive, and there's no evidence behind it. There's actually no evidence that nightshades worsen your health in general if you are healthy. If you have inflammatory issues like rheumatoid arthritis, some people may react to nightshades and other plant-based foods. But again, the food is not the culprit here. It's because you have an underlying disorder that you have to heal. And once they're in remission from their disorder, whether that's rheumatoid arthritis or inflammatory bowel disease, they're actually able to tolerate these foods really well, and they feel great eating them. So again, this is just a symptom of an underlying issue. The culprit is not the food.
I love that you said that. The culprit is not the food. It is not the food. These plant foods are beneficial to us. It's the weak microbiome. And people don't want to admit that they have a weak microbiome, especially if they're following a really healthy diet. They're like, no, it couldn't be my gut.
Yeah.
It has to be the food, but it's not. We have to accept that we need to work on our guts, and we all do. I mean, none of us have perfect microbiomes. But yeah, so how can people find you if they want to reach out or get help?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm active on social media as Plant-Based Gut Doc, so definitely follow me. I also run integrative multi-specialty practice, virtual practice called Planted Forward. Planted Forward because we're plant forward. We promote plant forward eating, but also we're planted forward because we're progressive in our thinking, right? We know that the solutions to most of the world's issues, we want to save the planet, our health, and the animals, is to be more plant forward. So we have multiple specialists, cardiologists, preventative cardiologists, multiple GI specialists, GI registered dietitians that are amazing. They will help recover your gut health like nobody's business. And we have a pediatrician, a lifestyle pediatrician. Everybody should have a preventative pediatrician,
because pediatricians in general, they're so busy that they're not able to talk a lot about nutrition and just promote, you know, nutrition in the practice. And we have a health coach. So definitely check out at plantedforward.com or plantedforward.com website, and also here on social media.
Sweet. Oh, thank you so much for spending this time with me. This has been so wonderful. And for everyone who's wondering, I am going to save this as an IGTV, and I will be putting on YouTube with links to find you, because definitely I feel like more people need to hear this message. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me on and introducing me to your audience. And anytime you want to come on and talk about specific food myths or any other gut health questions you come across, I'm happy to jump on.
Nice. Yes, we'll definitely have to do this again sometime for sure, because this was so good. So thank you very much. Have yourself a wonderful evening, and give your little baby angels extra hugs.
Thank you, Melissa. Bye, everybody. It was nice coming on here.
Yes. All right. Bye.